then. So Matt Walsh, who is aggressively untalented, but always seeking headlines and trying to find a way to stand out from his colleagues at the Daily Wire, right? He's a Daily Wire guy. Whether it's doing in-person reporting, on the ground reporting about critical race theory, or it's just saying things as outlandishly as possible in order to get headlines, which unfortunately we're going to provide him with this, but it needs to be broken down.
He's the sort of guy that puts theocratic fascist ironically in his Twitter bio, even though that is absolutely what he is.
Yes, he's trying to wink as he says it, but that's the reality. And there's never been a time where it's been more evident than this clip, where he just straight up says that he is not in favor of universal voting and believes that only a privileged few should be able to vote.
Well, as you know, this subject is always difficult for me emotionally. Whenever I hear Democrats panicking over the attack on voting rights, it hits me right in the heart. It shakes me to the core, gets my hopes up, because I very much wish that there was an attack on voting rights. I think universal voting rights is one of the worst ideas this country has ever had. There are few things more worthy of coming under attack than universal voting rights. Voting ought to be a privilege reserved for those who are most competent and qualified. It's not a natural right.
Pause it.
God did not imbue us all with
most competent and qualified. So that includes him. And also just like, I just want people to realize he's almost plagiarizing from the racist conservatives during Jim Crow, who made these exact same points in order to justify like poll taxes and literacy tests at polling sites. So just a reminder that that's the kind of throwback conservatism that he thinks is so edgy right now.
What words did he just use to describe who should get to vote?
We'll go back a little bit. Yeah.
Competent, qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so vague though. What is competent and qualified? Like even
conservatives.
No, it means property.
Well,
that's what I was going to.
Z-list YouTube pundits in their audiences. So, you hate to say it, but we get the vote still.
Then universal voting rights. Voting ought to be a privilege reserved for those who are most competent and qualified. It's not a natural right. God did not imbue us all with some sort of sacred entitlement to participate in our national elections. The Bible certainly makes no mention of any such thing. So if it's not a natural right, which it emphatically is not, then it's a privilege that we grant, and it would be wise to consider a person's basic qualifications.
All right, based on this standard, does the Bible say anything about owning guns?
Sorry, why the fuck are we talking about the Bible?
Yeah, well, I mean, because he's a theocrat. But the point is, even by his own standard, he had the great pause there, Bradley. He looks amazing. Keep that up, by the way. By his own standard, if it's not in the Bible, then it's not a right that needs to be protected by the government. So, guess the guns don't count. Keep going.
Before granting it, we are under no moral obligation to allow hordes of stupid, bewildered, clueless zombies to flood the voting booth and cast their ballots in a state of ignorance and confusion, helping to steer this giant ship of a country right into one iceberg after another. So that's my position, which I state often and without apology. I'm against voting rights. I don't like them. If it was a position shared by most conservatives and by any significant portion of elected Republicans, Democrats would be correct in claiming that universal voting rights are under assault, are at risk. But sadly, it is all in the left-wing imagination. I am, a lone voice in the wilderness on this issue.
Wow, how brave of you.
He's coming out against voting, a powerful state and a powerful stance in a democracy, I guess, representative republic, whatever the fuck we are. People always, have a name for it, but it's not important.
There's a lot of things these guys would complain about. There's a lot of things these guys complain about, I should say, that literally are not mentioned in the Bible at all. I would love to see how many times Matt Walsh complained about deplatforming. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesus didn't say anything about the social networks. Oh well, looks like that's just how it is.
First of all, Jesus deplatformed those lenders from the church that time. I've seen a lot of movies about the Bible. I watched all God is not dead. So I'm also pretty sure there are sections of the Bible about voting or choosing leaders that he just probably hasn't read it. And I'm definitely not going to fact check it. But I mean,
Jesus Christ hated decentralized finance.
The funny thing about like conservatives, like I don't believe that we have universal voting rights. Obviously, we do not, because we at the very least we have felon disenfranchisement. But he's speaking about a version of America, like the ideal version of America for that you see in sitcoms where everyone has the right to vote and our leaders are chosen that way. He's like, that sucks. No one hates America more than like conservatives. It's so funny. Like they just like the idea of an America that's like a libertarian bastion that has ultimately never existed and is not even like within, the boundaries of what the founding fathers would have said that they wanted. I mean, they established public schools right at, with the country.
Yeah, and also, you can welcome half measures without them being the full thing that you want, right? Like, I welcomed both Biden and Trump giving COVID relief to people, even though it wasn't full like socialism, and just like Walsh welcomes any sort of thing that on the margins cuts people off the voter rolls based on ID requirements or things like gerrymandering. I'm sure he's a big fan of, because of you tie it to the land, you're getting more competence, I think, somehow in his mind. But this is all Republicans. This is actually what they all think. They just aren't incentivized to be explicit about it on the Daily Wire for branding, because it's a liability to their politics, whereas it's an asset to Walsh.
I mean, exactly. To that point, this is what they all think, at least at the national level, and it's reflected in the way they gerrymander their districts and the way that they ensure that the elections are done as anti-democratically as possible. And it's one of the things that the Democratic Party just kind of sometimes harps on, they'll do like this little voting rights push, and if it passes or doesn't pass, we won't hear about the fact that Republicans are like cheating in all of the elections until like the day before the elections. That's a way to drive us out into the street, the polls to vote against them. But the reflection that the Republican Party is not playing a fair game and are actively trying to through gerrymandering, illegal gerrymandering, rig the vote in their favor, never seems to affect how they are treated by the larger political media apparatus, which should be illegitimate. Like they're a illegitimate party that is trying to carve out 50% or more of the country voting power with less than 50% of the country's population, along with a few prisoners in their districts. And it's just it's such a delegitimizing thing. But because we have to pretend our system works, the Republican Party, that's just one of their tactics, and it shouldn't be how we view them as, let's be honest, a bunch of anti-democratic.
Well, they're minoritarians. I mean, that's the only way that they're able to wield power is by over-representing a segment of the population by hook or by crook. But that's nothing new with conservatives. That's part of why the disenfranchisement of Black people was such a high priority, because that, for conservatives, that means, okay, that's a threat to the established order. And that's why it's not edgy for someone like Matt Walsh to be like, only property owners and basically white people should be able to vote. That goes back to ancient times, like ancient Greece or whatever, but it's also very American because that was a part of our founding. And so he just doesn't want to say, I equate capital success, because maybe some of his viewers aren't in the same boat as him. I equate capital success with worth and value in a society, and those are the only people who are valuable enough to make decisions. That's it.